20 years ago, a group of people led by their local congressman left their homes in the United States and flew deep into the jungles of Guyana, South America. Their mission? To rescue relatives whom they feared were in the grip of a strange cult called the People's Temple.
I was willing to lose my life to get my son.
You know, my people, they wanted those boys back.
I just said, you're going to have to kill me to stop me from trying to get my son back.
She never got her son back. Within 4 days of these concerned parents' arrival in Guyana, virtually every member of the People's Temple would be dead.
May 10th, 1999. This is Investigative Reports.
Hello, I'm Bill Curtis. It was a paradise gone mad. In a lush tropical jungle not far from the Atlantic Ocean, a group of people had carved out a life they thought would lead to utopia. But one morning, millions around the world would wake up and hear the news. More than 900 of these visionaries were now dead. Some 20 years later, Jonestown still raises as many questions as it does answers. Was it a mass suicide or a mass murder? Was it a mind control experiment gone awry? Was the CIA somehow involved? In this edition of Investigative Reports, we go back to 1978 and we discover some fascinating revelations about Jim Jones and his so-called People's Temple. The leader of Jonestown was a man who called himself the Reverend Jim Jones. He was a sinister and charismatic figure who had built a community 1,000 strong in the jungle. What happened here is one of the biggest news stories of the century. At the time, it was billed by the press as a mass suicide, and this has formed our thinking about cults ever since. But tonight, using dramatic new evidence and testimony from survivors who have never spoken on television before, the official version of events is brought into question.
There's no doubt in my mind that it was a mass murder. I never used the term suicide. I always hated that.
The U.S. Army medical team were among the first eyewitnesses to the tragedy in Jonestown.
At the bottom were the babies. On top of the babies were toddlers and younger children. On top of the toddlers and younger children were pre-adolescents, then teenagers, parents, and then other adults and senior citizens. I assume that probably a lot of them did not take the poison voluntarily. Anytime something dies in the tropics, the buzzards come, and they take care of the carrion. There were no buzzards in Jonestown, and there were maggots and flies, but I didn't see any buzzards, and that surprised me. And then when I realized later on that the bodies were probably contaminated with cyanide, maybe the birds realized that they shouldn't be eating these bodies.
But the medical team were not the only people in Jonestown that day. During the immediate aftermath, Jeff Braley was approached by a man in civilian clothes who asked him to guard a large box of documents.
And he said, "I'm from the U.S. Embassy. If anybody tries to take this box away from me, shoot them." And I said, "You got to be out of your mind. I'm not going to shoot anybody." And he told me that the box was full of sensitive documents and he needed to get those to the U.S. Embassy. I think he probably was CIA.
The documents then disappeared into the CIA, and their contents remain secret to this day. 20 years later, the CIA continues to deny any interest in the People's Temple. They claim that their own file on Jones is empty. But new evidence reveals startling connections between Jones and members of the U.S. intelligence community. To understand those connections and what they mean, we must first come to grips with Jim Jones himself. Who was he?
The devil. Devil might have been a better person than he was. I don't know.
He had a method of penetrating your mind with his eyes, and he could control you.
He had cold black eyes. I've never seen a person that way. He had literally black eyes.
If you would watch him and listen to him, he had you. And he knew that.
Jim Jones was born in Indiana in 1931 and raised in the deep freeze of the Cold War. For years, he walked down this back alley to the elementary school in Lynn with his childhood friend, Don Foreman.
And I liked him. I found him to be very interesting. Whenever he would talk, I'd listen. I really liked to listen to him. He liked to get people out in the town to listen to him at an early age. They'd all make donations, and we'd roll the money up and put it in the saddlebag, and I'd take him home. Unusual. 14, 15-year-old boy.
But the boy preacher was already beginning to show the dark side of his personality. During their time together in Lynn, he had tried to shoot his friend Don on 3 separate occasions.
Now, I had been to Jim's house to have supper with him, and I said, I've got to go home. Jim said, don't leave. And he was very forceful. And about that time, he reached over and he grabbed that pistol. I took about 10 steps on down his steps, and he let the first one go. And it missed me, and it lodged in a tree. I could see it hit the bark of a tree. A tree was maybe that big around. And I could see the bark fly off the side of the tree. And so I turned, and I really started running, and he fired again. And I don't know where the bullet went. It didn't hit me. But that was, like I say, a 38 or a 45. And that's the last time I ever went to his house.
While still a teenager, Jones established a pulpit on the street corners of Richmond, Indiana, where he sold monkeys door to door in order to fund his activities. There he came to know a juvenile police officer named Dan Matrone, whose improbable path Jones would cross and recross in the years ahead. By the late 1950s, Jones had married his high school sweetheart, Marceline, and established an interracial church based in Indianapolis. He called it the People's Temple. At first, the church prospered, but Jones had a secret life. Matrone left Richmond and joined a sometime CIA cover at the State Department. Coincidentally or not, Jones suddenly became of deep interest to the most clandestine department of the agency, whose activities included mind control experiments, attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, and operations to infiltrate and disrupt black organizations. For reasons that the CIA has always refused to explain, they opened a secret file in Jones' name. Suddenly, Jones abandoned his church, and armed with 2 passports, the young charismatic preacher traveled to a series of political hotspots: Mexico, Cuba, Guyana, and Brazil. Though he spoke no Portuguese, in 1962, Jones moved to Belo Horizonte, a small town in Brazil. With no apparent means of support, he rented an expensive house and began to make in-depth studies into voodoo, faith healing, mass conversion, and ESP, a key investigative element of the CIA's mind control program. But Jones was not the only person there from Richmond, Indiana. He later bragged of visits to his neighbor, Dan Matrone. The former police chief was now working for a sometime CIA cover at the U.S. consulate, training Brazilian police in the subtleties of hostile interrogation. Jones was also contacted by another key member of American intelligence at that time, John Lodison, who'd been kicked out of the Soviet Union for spying. In Brazil, he met with Jones for reasons that the CIA still refuses to explain. But Jones' stay in Brazil did not last. He left the country soon after a newspaper article appeared claiming he was a CIA agent. Returning to the USA, Jones moved the People's Temple to Northern California, where its membership grew rapidly. From its headquarters in Ukiah, a fleet of temple buses shuttled Jones' followers to large-scale services in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Jones was a great showman, mixing powerful oratory with spectacular faith healing.
You've been feeling pain here in the chest and in the back. I do not know you, and you've told me or no one else the things I just mentioned.
No, you sure haven't.
Now, where's your pain?
Many believed in his faith healing and still do today.
He called me out and he said, "You have cancer." And I look at, I said, went to then, I said, well, I was getting mighty poor, you know. So he said, go to the restroom. And he called the nurse's name and told her to take me, go to the bathroom with me and tell me how to do and what to do.
The cancers, they used to take the innards, the gizzards and stuff of chickens, and they would rot them under, like, Jim's house. And then when they were real rotten, then the nurses would draw blood. And so they would get Kleenex and they would put these gizzards, these rotten gizzards, and then their blood, and they would take, you know, he would mostly pick older black women.
And it come from my body. That what she had on that paper come from my body. I seen it. I was in there by myself. I smelled it.
Then this was, you know, walked around the church. And supposedly I never got real close, but there was quite an odor to it.
I didn't think that I could smell like that, and I'm alive. Oh, I just had a lot of miracles happen from Jim.
Yesterday, now run.
There may have been a strong touch of carnival sideshow to Jones' faith healing, but his sermons were laced with a kind of messianic socialism that appealed directly to the poor and disaffected.
What's your sky God ever done? You asked and begged and pleaded for help with your suffering, and he never gave you any food. He never provided a bed. He never gave you a home. But I, the socialist worker God, have given you all those things. Stop sick. And you won't die if you trump him. You will die if you stand up. You will die if you jump up and down. Because I am freedom. I am peace. I am justice. I am equality. I am God.
If you've been thinking about jumping into a rugged new Montana,
I need more room!
now's a really good time.
Never seen a minivan do that before. Maybe it's not really a minivan.
Life is more exciting in Montana. Now jump into a rugged Montana with this limited time offer. But get a move on because the train's leaving the station.
I don't know.
Fair enough. Maybe this'll help. As you can see, I love you more than anything in the world. Note the dramatic increase in the past 7 months. This shows how much we have in common. My 10-year gross earnings potential. A composite of what our kids might look like.
I like what you've done here, Craig.
Sometimes it's not just what you say, but how you say it. Kinko's. Express yourself.
Reach across time and see yourself. You stand tall against terrifying enemies. You build masterpieces and break down barriers. You rush into the future and meet your past. For every time, at every moment, the official network of every millennium. The History Channel, where the past comes alive.
An A&E Investigative Report Special.
Talk to me.
Their beat is the human mind.
You just had a bad day.
How do you take down a madman without firing a shot?
Talk to me.
Hostage negotiators of the NYPD on an all-new Investigative Reports. May 23rd at 9 Eastern, 10 Pacific on A&E.
By the early 70s, the People's Temple was well established in the Bay Area. But by then, Jones was unable to tolerate even the slightest dissent from his people. In nighttime sessions at the San Francisco Temple, members were regularly abused, both verbally and physically, in confrontational meetings.
Everyone in the room, about 100 people, were required to stand up and defame you.
You know, you're subject to get kicked. They would go upside your head to make sure you looked straight at Jones. People got knocked out, you know, and revived with water thrown on them, you know, and actually continue whooping.
Jones' choice of punishment for a man accused of child molestation was particularly brutal.
Jim had him in a room upstairs in the San Francisco Temple, and I was brought in midway through what was happening, and he was being beaten with a rubber hose. Jim explained that this was a punishment that had to be. However, it became so violent and so frightening. He was beaten on his body, and then he was beaten just on his penis.
Jones also sexually abused members of the church, as Debbie Layton discovered in the children's restroom of the San Francisco Temple.
He told me to lay down next to the urinal, the one where all the little children had peed that day, the little toddlers. And with his cloak, he covered us both. And then after that, he apologized. He said he did it for me. I needed to know just how pretty I was.
We got a double edge here, you know, because like I said, there was the public face as well as the family face. What we seen in the family atmosphere, the public didn't see.
What the public saw in Jones was a powerful force for good. In 1975, he was voted San Francisco's Humanitarian of the Year. When George Moscone was running for mayor, Jones put the People's Temple political machine to work.
It was like 500 people were leafleting on the street within 30 minutes. But Jones said, if you win, I want a job.
Moscone made Jones commissioner of housing for the city. He celebrated his new appointment with a speech. His subject, the evils of suicide, aimed at those people who killed themselves by jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. But Jones was planning to move the People's Temple out of San Francisco altogether. He had a master plan to enlarge the People's Temple and open up communities all over Latin America. He ordered several hundred of his followers to the country of Guyana.
Well, frankly, I had never heard of it.
All he told me was that it was just a little country down in South America.
They wasn't gonna take down, you know, not me.
Debbie Layton was 19 when she joined the People's Temple. In 1972, by the time she was 23, she was a key member of the white matriarchy who formed the temple's inner circle. She was one of the first to arrive in what became Jonestown.
When the first pioneers from the Bay Area came down here, they loved it. You know, they cleared the land and they built their cabins and they lived, you know, as village people.
In the beginning, Jonestown was an extraordinary success story. Jones' followers had carved out an almost utopian society in the jungle.
What I thought we were doing, you know, which was building a community for our children that was progressive, that was peaceful, that where people could live in harmony of different races and different backgrounds, different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. That's what I saw Jonestown as.
The Promised Land was going to be just a beautiful country that we were going to. And he had come here before and taken movies, but they were edited quite well, actually.
Flour, rice, black-eyed peas, more peas. Have different containers surround the place. We couldn't go through all the tremendous inventory they built up. Kool-Aid, various kind of cookies.
I believe to this day that if you remove Jim Jones from the picture, that Jonestown would have been successful.
4 years after his followers went to Guyana, Jim Jones was about to move there permanently. But he was in trouble in San Francisco. He was already undergoing treatment for psychiatric disorders when he was arrested after indecently exposing himself to a police officer in a public washroom. His lawyers got the charges dropped, but by now, investigative journalists had the scent of a good story. The New West magazine published an article about beatings, corruption, and rape in the People's Temple. As soon as the article was published, Jones moved 700 more temple members to Guyana.
They took me to the airport, and I jumped on a United airline, and boom.
Beverly Oliver came home to find her sons gone.
I found the rooms in a shambles. Pictures knocked off the wall like they was leaving in a hurry.
Almost immediately after Jones arrived at the camp, conditions began to deteriorate as Jones turned his dangerous paranoia on his increasingly fearful followers.
Thanks, Father.
Conditions at Jonestown would soon go from bad to worse. When Investigative Reports returns, the punishing cries of children would now be heard throughout the camp nearly every night.
Need brakes? Now during the Midas $40 lifetime brakes rebate, save $20 per axle or $40 for your whole car. Lifetime guaranteed $40 in savings right now. Go safely. Go Midas.
We're looking at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th planets to help you remember 10, 10, 3, 4, 5. The simple way to save up to 50% on international calls.
Jupiter is the 5th planet, not Saturn.
Whoops.
Nobody predicted when SUVs were created by some crazy Californian who covered his truck that this would become a new kind of car and then would become a luxurious kind of car. The Pathfinders emerged as a real luxury vehicle. I mean, we've designed in heated seats, a state-of-the-art Bose CD system. These are not items that you would expect from a car that can slog through the mud with the best of them.
Are you ready, boys?
Ready.
Some things we may never understand. Some things we should. At ReliaStar, we help you understand the complex world of investments and insurance so you can make the right financial choices. ReliaStar.
Adrenaline rushing, hearts pounding, heavy breathing. It's almost as much fun as your first date. Royal Caribbean, like no vacation on Earth.
Talk to me. Hostage negotiators of the NYPD on an all-new Investigative Reports. May 23rd on A&E.
Turn the page and experience a lifetime. Biography Magazine. Defining moments. Intimate details. Biography Magazine. Every life has a story.
Jonestown was in its 4th year when Jones arrived in 1977. Conditions had never been easy, but when he took over, the agricultural mission became a labor camp.
Well, Jim had armed guards. I mean, young men and women who were told that they needed to watch everybody, and it kept you working hard.
The day consisted of, you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you go to breakfast. You get one bowl of rice. At that time, I think it was rice and milk, is what it was. And the rice and milk consisted sometimes of bugs floating around all on top.
We headed out to the fields, and you vied to go really far out, actually, because you couldn't hear Jim over the loudspeakers. Jonestown was wired with loudspeakers, and Jim spoke 24 hours a day on it. When he wasn't speaking, the tapes that they'd made of him speaking played on and on and on about the conspiracy against us, about how the United States government was coming in to kill us.
We didn't know Jim had gunfire going off in the jungle, but we heard it, and he said it was the United States government coming in to torture the children and kill us. And Jim would make these announcements, and he'd say, I'm sending out some children and some of my aides and other people you won't know who they are to pretend they want to leave. And it's a test, it's a loyalty test. And if anyone comes to you, you're to report them.
You didn't know who it would be, so you just never put the place down, and how much you enjoyed it there, how much you loved the place, and how great he was, and how Father was so nice, and you had to call him Father. You just never said anything bad about the place, because if you did, you would be coming up there that night.
They had this discipline thing where they would discipline kids.
It was a punishment for the child and the parent. And they'd be taken away from the pavilion at night, and you could hear them screaming.
And as they screamed, that microphone was put to their mouth so that the whole compound could hear.
And they'd be taken to a well in the distance at night, and they'd be tied by ropes and, held down in it, and they'd go down, and they couldn't see, and something would grab at them and pull them down. It was called Bigfoot at the time.
In 1978, Debbie Layton and Grace Stoen both defected with terrifying accounts of what was happening inside the camp. They also told of full-scale rehearsals for mass suicide in the jungle.
I'll talk to psychiatrists, whatever, but I believe I was brainwashed.
With other defectors, the two women began their campaign to expose Jones and rescue their loved ones. They flew to Guyana, but to their surprise, they got no help from American authorities.
Everybody closed the door in our face.
Once in the capital, Georgetown, they were met with apparent delaying tactics by the embassy staff.
So we'll give you 30 minutes of our time because we want to hear from you, but 30 minutes. And they put the slideshow on of people in Jonestown playing baseball and things like that, and we balked at that, and we said, wait a minute, this is propaganda. This is orchestrated. We know it. We've been there. We've seen it. What do you think, we're nuts? And they said, look, if you don't watch this film, and you're wasting time, by the way, because the 30 minutes is going, we're not talking to you.
The American ambassador, John Burke, was equally unwilling to discuss the matter with the relatives.
I would like to have this opportunity to talk together in a candid way because there are sensitive considerations and legal considerations involved.
The American embassy was a bastard, and I hope he see this. And we had birth certificates, pictures, everything to show that we was the parents of those two boys. And he was no help whatsoever.
His demeanor was always, what's the problem here, folks? There's nothing going on. We're keeping track. We haven't seen anything that's, they have one gun license to them, and, I don't know what your concerns are. They're really, it was just, they always just put us off.
Leading the concerned relatives was their local congressman, Leo Ryan. He too was kept in the dark. While his requests for information were refused on the grounds of privacy, the local U.S. Embassy kept Jones informed of all the questions Ryan was asking.
Jim's was, but I intend to keep pushing as long as I'm here.
Well, he was such a kind man, so compassionate, didn't get excited about nothing. Oh, it'll be okay. It'll be fine. Just take it easy. It'll be fine. That's just the way he was.
For some time, Ryan had been a thorn in the side of the CIA. He had recently pushed through congressional legislation that curtailed the agency's covert foreign activities. As Ryan prepared for a first-hand look at Jonestown, he was joined by a State Department agent, Richard Dwyer. What he didn't know was that Dwyer was working undercover.
A man named Dwyer was the head of the CIA here. The CIA had a presence here. It was an unrevealed presence at the time.
As Ryan and the relatives were about to depart for Jonestown, Jones himself was slipping deeper into a drug-induced paranoia.
He became more of a dictator, and because he was closing us and himself off from the world, and he had no true input that was level-headed, he became a part of his own paranoia, and down here was completely insane.
Immediately prior to Ryan's arrival, Jones transferred $1 million to accounts in Panama and Switzerland. What few knew was that a cargo of cyanide was coming by river to Jonestown, and Congressman Ryan and the relatives were about to fall into a death trap.
Good afternoon, Heaven.
My daughter's marrying a musician.
I'll transfer you. Heaven.
I'm on fire!
Oh, I'll put you right through. Heaven.
I need 1,000 digital color copies ASAP.
Ooh, sorry.
Need a copying miracle? Call Alpha Graphics.
So you spot a termite. Problem is, he's just one of many. Beat the termites with the Terminix team and our termite baiting program, featuring Centricon. Call 1-800-TERMINIX. No bugs, no hassles.
Helping people experience the joy and fulfillment of reading is very important to me. Start early. Get your child interested in reading through newspapers, magazines, and books. Read to your children. Encourage them to read every day by themselves. Reading is the most precious gift you can give them. They'll love you for it.
Encourage your child to read every day.
ValueAmerica.com gives me more time in the day.
There's simply no better place to buy office products.
Others say they're big, but no one offers more than ValueAmerica.com.
Electronics to computers to Pampers, and it's so easy to buy.
ValueAmerica.com, the best name in internet shopping, delivering on the promise of e-commerce.
ValueAmerica.com. Just try it. You'll see.
ValueAmerica.com.
On the next investigative reports, peace, love, and murder.
He was our hippie.
Convicted of a brutal killing.
The pain was just frozen solid. It was mummified.
Why is he free and the law can't touch him?
I will hunt him down to the end of the earth.
The Ira Einhorn story on Investigative Reports. Tomorrow at 9 Eastern, 10 Pacific on A&E.
The wild, wild west, where legends are made. And the next great adventure is wherever you steer your horse. So head for the hills, where the mines are filled with gold, and you'll find action and adventure, because the West is wilder than ever. At Atlantic City's great frontier, the Wild Wild West Casino at Bally's Park Place.
The comfort of being close to your New Jersey home. The expertise of Philadelphia's leading comprehensive cancer center. That's Fox Chase Cancer Center at Virtua Memorial Hospital, Burlington County. Our breast evaluation service takes one convenient visit. Our second opinion service brings nationally known physicians from Philadelphia to you. You'll feel confident in having access to all the latest cancer treatments. Fox Chase at Virtua Memorial, 888-810-9989.
While the relatives were being delayed by the embassy in Georgetown, Jones was busy organizing Congressman Ryan's reception.
We were told not to act and not to go up and speak to him and to act nice, just like any other diplomat would come in and show him how happy we were there, or we would pay for it after he left.
Ryan's party arrived, and the relatives finally met their loved ones.
And I'm sitting in between each one, and Jim walked up, slurred tongue, and said, "Yes, see, Mrs. Oliver. I told you, you could see your boys anytime. But when Bruce told me, Mama, please don't say nothing negative, I checked myself and more or less tried to get it together. The kid is telling me something."
Something happened that was actually pretty dramatic when Ryan was talking.
Whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
The place exploded. It was like the only time that the mass of people there could somehow express themselves as to what Jonestown meant to them.
But the next day, 20 temple members decided they wanted to leave. In a haze of drugs, Jones' world began to fall apart.
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about liars? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us.
My ex-girlfriend's grandmother ran up to him and told him that we wanted to go. And a couple others then after that walked up and said, yes, we want to go.
With each person that came forward and said, I want to leave, the feelings of shock and disintegration became palpable. Families were being ripped apart.
You bring those kids back here! You bring them back! Don't you get back here!
Well, we took off out of Jonestown on a tractor trailer. And on our way there, we kept telling Mr. Ryan that don't trust this man. He'll try something. He'll try anything. He won't let us out of here alive. And Leo Ryan, God rest his soul, and he's such a nice man, said, no, don't worry, you're going home, you're going home. He had no idea what this man was capable of doing. So we kept yelling out, let's go, let's go, let's go. And Mr. Ryan kept talking to people out there, talking to them about the place or something to that extent. And all of a sudden, out the window, we could see another tractor trailer coming down the airstrip.
I came out of the aircraft to get them to board because you're running late. I think it was about 10 to 6 at the time. And then from the top end, I saw this red tractor trailer.
They pulled up on the left-hand side of the plane, and up popped about 6 or 8 people with rifles, M16, shotguns, everything. The door was still open on our airplane. They started shooting.
The first hit was an NBC cameraman, shot to death along with 5 others, including Ryan.
Then I heard what I thought was pellets or stones in the aircraft. And the guys who were next to me were not there as I looked around, because they were shot.
And they riddled the whole plane. It was like Swiss cheese. They just tore it up.
And everybody started screaming and hollering, telling the pilot to take off. And he constantly saying, I can't. They shot off the wheels, shot the wheels.
Me and my girlfriend started to jump for the floor. And her mother behind her, us, me and my girlfriend, wasn't so lucky. She had buckled her seatbelt. She couldn't get out of it in time. And a bullet came through and hit her. And I still have nightmare. I still think a lot about that.
And they shot her through the head, like they did Ryan and all the reporters. They shot him, and then they walked up on him and shot the brains out.
After the initial onslaught, the assassins selected victims among the wounded and executed them.
There was a guy behind who was shooting. He had what probably could have been like a .45. He was just going around making sure that everybody was dead.
One man who was not executed at the airstrip was Richard Dwyer, the undercover CIA man from the American Embassy, seen here peeling off from Ryan's party seconds before the tractor arrives. Where Dwyer was in the next few hours is key to one of the mysteries that still lies at the heart of the Jonestown tragedy. When the news of the slayings reached Temple headquarters in Georgetown, Sharon Amos, a hardline member of Jones' trusted inner circle, quickly rounded up her children. She ushered them all down a hall to the main bedroom and into the adjoining bathroom, where she slit their throats with a butcher's knife before killing herself. Next, Jonestown becomes a sea of death, and we hear it described firsthand from the mouth of Jim Jones himself as he secretly records a tragedy that would shake the world. You tell us at ane.com.
The biggest websites, from Amazon.com to Yahoo. And the biggest companies, from British Airways to General Motors, use Oracle for e-business. Do you?
When he disappeared, he was a scientist. When they found him, he was a killer.
He was a dangerous psychotic.
Now, one psychiatrist must uncover what he knows.
Why does this all end in murder?
There were many murders. And what has changed him forever.
I learned more than anyone's ever learned.
Academy Award winner Anthony Hopkins. Academy Award winner Cuba Gooding Jr.
Have I made your day?
Instinct. Rated R. Starts Friday, June 4th.
In Georgia, at the Grayfield Inn, it's the pecan pralines that make their breakfast cereal so delicious. In Vermont, at the Inn at Ormsby Hill, maple waffles set their cereal apart. And in Monterey Bay, baked palmiers make breakfast unique at Green Gables Inn. New country inn specialties, old-style recipes from 3 of our favorite inns, each one a taste of a beautiful place. Country inn specialties. Go someplace nice for breakfast.
From the network that brought you the people you thought you knew, comes the all-new Biography Channel. 24 hours a day. Step into the shoes of great entertainers, leaders and legends.
I have never been a quitter.
And lives of crime. All tied together with exciting mini-features on the people you want to know more about.
It's a nice balance of humor and tragedy.
Call your cable operator or satellite provider and ask for the Biography Channel.
On the next investigative reports, peace, love, and murder.
He was our hippie.
Convicted of a brutal killing.
The hand was just frozen solid. It was mummified.
Why is he free and the law can't touch him?
I will hunt him down to the end of the earth.
The Ira Einhorn story on Investigative Reports. Tomorrow at 9 Eastern, 10 Pacific on A&E.
Buying a car will never be the same. Because now you can check out any car you want and see how it stacks up to the competition whenever it's convenient for you. With our new website, even when the showroom is closed, we're still open. Introducing GMBuyPower.com.
The internet is revolutionizing business. From egghead.com to eBay. From E-Trade to Excite. The companies that know the internet best use Oracle for e-business. Do you?
Having dealt with Congressman Ryan, Jones now turned his insanity on the temple's faithful.
At this point in time, Jonestown had become surreal. Almost everything that was going on seemed surreal to me. I mean, by this time, I pretty much figured out this guy was mad. But he said, I've never seen or felt Jonestown so peaceful or quiet. And I remember getting a chill just course through my body because Jonestown had never been in more agony, had never been so less together.
Later, Tim Carter found Jones in a heated discussion with Temple member Dick Trop.
Dick Trop was saying, we can't die. This makes no sense. He said, we go on. We've worked too hard. We've built too much. You know, we can make this work. We can win. We can survive. Maria Katsaros walked up to Jones and whispered in his ear, and he looked at her and said, isn't there any way to make it taste less bitter? And she said, no, apparently not. And he said something like, well, do the best you can. And I thought, I have to get out of here.
But then the tractor-trailer returned with news that Congressman Ryan was dead.
Congressman's dead. I don't know who fired the shot. I don't know who killed the congressman. But as far as I'm concerned, I killed him. You understand what I'm saying? I killed him. He had no business coming. I told him not to come.
From his seat in the pavilion, Jones recorded the last desperate hour of the People's Temple. In front of him, more than 900 of his followers, who were surrounded by guards holding rifles and crossbows. For all but a few, there was no escape. Subsequent medical examinations revealed that many of the dead had been murdered, held down, and injected with cyanide.
I wanted my wife and son, and I wanted out of Jonestown. And Jones looked at me with probably the coldest look I've ever seen from any human being in my life and said, will you take care of your son first?
And I don't think we should sit here and take any more time for our children to be endangered. But if they come after our children and we give them our children, then our children will suffer forever.
No, Jim had always planned that the children would be taken first. That no one, not their parents, not their grandparents, would run away.
Hurry, hurry, my children, hurry. All I say, let's not fall into the hands of the enemy. Hurry, my children. Quickly, 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 quickly. Sisters, want to get the medication here, you got to move.
Once that order was given for the kids, the children to go first, there was a lot of, like holding back.
It's not to be feared. It is not to be feared. It's a friend. It's a friend. Please get us some medication. It's simple. It's simple. There's no convulsions with it. It's just simple. Just please get it. Before it's too late to tell you, get moving, get moving, get moving.
Some of the mothers that were holding their babies, they wasn't letting them go. Some of the security people were just taking babies out of those mothers' hands.
The best thing you do to relax, and you have no problem. You have no problem with the thing if you just relax.
From where I was standing, I can see that these kids was not drinking this stuff. They were like spitting it out. They were forcing this shit down these kids' mouth.
All it is taking a drink to go to sleep. Keep your emotions down. Keep your emotions down. Children, it will not hurt if you'll be quiet. If you'll be quiet.
This little guy that he was about 13 years old. His first name was Thurman. Thurman actually stumbled onto me, and he was falling to the ground, and as he was falling, he began to convulse. Thurman died in my hand. And I knew then that this shit was real.
I've never lied to you. I never have lied to you. I'm the best friend you'll ever have. You'll regret it if you do, though you don't die. You'll regret it.
I turned to my right for whatever reason, and I saw my wife standing there with tears running down her cheeks, and she was holding her son, and a nurse was squirting poison in his mouth. But after I saw this image of my son, my whole body, my whole psyche was overloaded. I'd almost gone past the point of even thinking, and was feeling so much that I couldn't feel anymore. It was just darkness. And blackness.
How many are dead? Oh, God Almighty, God Almighty. This choice is not ours now. It's out of our hands. I think it's humane.
And, I've been asked, why didn't you knock over the poison? Why didn't you kill him? And I can't answer that because those are rational questions and logical questions being asked to somebody who just watched their son be murdered.
Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. Just stepping over into another plane. Don't be this way. Stop this hysterics.
Several, about 20 of us, had already made a decision that we were going to try to run, that we were going to, we were going to leave this if this came to this. And I was gung-ho. I was that serious about mine, and where that each and every one of them just came to me and told me that they couldn't do it. They had lost their kids, they had lost, loved ones and mothers. It was just something, somebody that was close to them was gone, and they wouldn't be able to make it.
So I was on stage for just seconds. And I stepped back off the stage, and my wife was kneeling on the ground a few feet behind the pavilion, and Malcolm was dead. And I knelt down next to her and I held her. And I just told her, I love you so much. And I wished I could have gotten away for her to be out of there. And at that, I felt her dying in my arms. And at that point in time, I didn't give a shit about anything or anybody. I just wanted to live. I wanted out of there.
I tell you, I don't care how many screams you hear, I don't care how many anguished cries. Death is 1,000,000 times preferable to 10 more days of this life. If you knew what was ahead of you, if you knew what was ahead of you, you'd be glad that he's stepping over tonight.
I thought about laying down among the dead. I did that and lay down there for, I don't know, probably about 15 minutes.
Okay. Please, for God's sake, let's get on with it. We've lived as no other people have lived and loved. We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it.
That's when I began to run, and I started hauling ass as fast as I could, straight out to the jungle.
Though his followers were dying all around him, the last tape reveals that Jones himself clearly intended to survive.
I want to go. I want to see you go, though. They can take me and do with me whatever they want to do. I want to see you go. I don't want to see you go through this hell no more. No more, no more, no more.
In the middle of the carnage, one of Jones' closest aides, Maria Katsaris, handed Tim Carter $1.5 million in cash, with orders to take it to the Soviet embassy.
The assignment itself was ridiculous, but it was a way to keep going.
So they'll pay for this. They brought this upon us, and they'll pay for that.
I just said, this is ridiculous, carrying these suitcases, and we dropped one of them.
All over, and it's good. No sorrow that it's all over. I'm glad it's over.
We dropped another suitcase, I think, at what we called the piggery, or where the chickens were and so on. So by the time we got even out to the road, there was only one suitcase left. And that one was dumped on the railroad tracks.
No more pain, Al. No more pain, I said, Al. No more pain.
And the last thing that I heard from Jonestown was Jones's voice on the loudspeaker saying, "Mother, mother, mother."
Mother, 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 please. Mother, please, please, please. Don't do this. Don't do this.
And I'm certain the only person called Mother in Jonestown was Marcelin Jones. And in reality, Marcelin was trying to stop the killing, and he was talking down to her.
We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world.
Jones himself was one of the last to die. A single gunshot to the head sometime around midnight. His killer has never been known. At 3:30 in the morning, when everyone was dead, and several hours before anyone arrived, a radio message was sent from Jonestown using a secret CIA channel, reporting what it described as a mass suicide. This was the message that shaped our view of Jonestown for years to come, even though the best medical evidence suggests that most of those who died had been murdered. The question then becomes, who sent that message? The only functioning radio in the area belonged to the local American intelligence officer, Richard Dwyer. Though he always denied going back to Jonestown that night, the last tape tells a very different story.
Take Dwyer on down to the East House. Get Dwyer out of here before something happens to him. Dwyer? I'm not talking about you, Jara. I said Dwyer.
Though more than 900 Americans had died, Richard Dwyer and other U.S. Embassy officials would later receive medals and promotions. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit was subsequently filed by Congressman Ryan's daughter and the relatives of those who died. The suit described the deaths as a massacre and alleged that Jones was an agent or operative of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was dismissed on a technicality and never tried. Two years after Jonestown, a House Intelligence Committee said it found no evidence suggesting a CIA connection to Jim Jones or his followers. Many disagreed, maintaining the congressional inquiry was too superficial and ignored key evidence. A few years later, a California court approved a final settlement of nearly $10 million for survivors of Jonestown and for relatives of those who died there. The money came from secret funds, tracked back to Jim Jones, but kept hidden throughout Latin America. Ironically, in another suit, the biggest money winner of all was the U.S. government. It got $1.4 million for airlifting the victims' bodies out of Jonestown back to the United States.